Hey there, this is Dan. You're watching this LTC, and it is around 6 weeks until Adepticon, which is just enough time to purchase and paint a warband if that's the kind of thing you're into, if you like doing things a little last minute. I thought I would do a list building video for events. I've also on this channel a couple times maybe mentioned that I don't love the effect of Bladeborn on the game. And I really do think that the positives outweigh the negatives for what Bladeborn is doing. And so, I have issues of when it's used where little Bladeborn chaff models look exactly the same as other chaff models that are on the table, etc. But Bladeborn can be done responsibly, and you can make really cool, fun lists with them. And so I thought I would highlight that a little bit here. So let's get into it. Some sweet lists that I'm not going to take to Adepticon for various reasons, but would be a ton of fun, and I hope to see them. The first is Scaven. And Scaven are in this really interesting place. They have a pretty solid win rate, but you pretty much never see them in the winner's circle of tournaments. And there are a few reasons for that. One is Storm Fiends are excellent, which I think is why their win rate is, consistently in a very good spot. But the issue with Scaven is that it can be tough sometimes to win objective missions. Rat Ogres are much better at objective missions than Storm Fiends are, but Rat Ogres have this problem where a lot of the Titans in the game will just sort of bounce them off the field. So you kind of have this sort of push and pull that can be hard to 4-0 with them, even though you can get a lot of 3-1s. So I'm trying to use Bladeborn here to overcome some of the sort of barriers that are holding Scaven back from really, really crushing it. So I wanted to use the old algorithm. Now, one of the problems with Scaven is that they are move 6, they're very fast, and speed costs a lot of points currently, but it didn't cost that many points back in the day when a lot of these Bladeborn fighters were pointed. Scritch Spikeclaw and his friends were never really brought into the current points, and so they are all a little bit cheaper than you would normally see for these abilities and these profiles. Scritch is essentially just a fancy looking Claw Lord. And then you have Kirk, the Almost Trusted. You have Lurking Scaven, Festering Scaven, 2 Storm Fiends, of course, because that's the point here, and then 1 Storm Vermin. This is cool because Scritch can resurrect the same kind of triple that Soulblight has, that Nighthaunt has, can resurrect Lurking Skaven and Festering Skaven, which is very cool. Storm Fiends don't really require a lot of dice, so bringing in something with a lot of sort of dice-hungry powers can be pretty nice. Then the Storm Vermin can actually protect Scritch, which is a really nice little addition here. And then, of course, you have the superpower from the 2 Storm Fiends. This hopefully sort of supports them a lot better than you can otherwise do easily in Skaven. Getting 2 Storm Fiends and still have 7 models is pretty nice. I'm not going to be running this because of model availability. I don't have any of these non-Storm Fiend models. I have these 2 Storm Fiends, but none of the other ones. So I can't run this, but I hope someone does, because I do think this is pretty powerful and absolutely worth testing. Now we're going to go kind of lower on the power level grade, still going with Scaven Underworlds warbands. And I wanted to do this with a really cool theme list that you could absolutely take to a narrative event anywhere, or really any casual gaming. Starting with a Lord of Plagues, Skabic Plague Seeker, Rabidus Skench, and Poxlix. This is all from the new Pestilence warband for Warhammer Underworlds. Then you have 2 Blight Kings with Sonorous Toxin, 1 Blight King Icon Bearer, and a regular Blight King. So Nurgle is in an interesting spot. They are very survivable. Their mortals, of course, are very survivable and reasonably points efficient. The problem is the things they're points efficient at don't necessarily score a lot of points, right? So it doesn't matter if you can't clear them off the board, if you just outnumber them on objectives and beat them in a pacifism game. It doesn't matter that they're hard to kill if they can't kill you either. because they can't reach you. They don't do a lot of damage, and they're very slow. And their one movement ability doesn't really do a ton either. It's only +1 move. That can be enough to get them to objectives early in the game, which is what you need, but you kind of need more than that. So, especially in like kill missions where you need to hunt things down. So they can kind of struggle on their own. And so I had an idea to try to pump them up in a way that could be pretty fun with Scabic. Scabic gives you some extra numbers here. Of course, you get to count to 8, which is a very different amount than 7, which is where you usually end up with these. And you also have a somewhat interesting ability to put out damage on objective missions, which is something that these guys desperately need. You can put a couple bodies on an objective and then deal a bunch of damage, forcing your opponent to put more bodies, and then you deal a bunch of damage to them with Scabic's pretty sweet little ability. And so there's kind of a lot you can do. Scabic also has an ability to get like a weird bonus actions attacks so that you can put out some damage in kill missions too. This Underworlds warband is not super points efficient, but they do things that can win games, which is really nice because your maggot can have the opposite problem where they are pretty points efficient, but they don't do the things that score points. And so hopefully marrying these two together could really get you some results. I think this would be a really fun warband to have. I don't think it would be sort of bursting down the doors of competitive play anytime soon, but I do think that this is, one of the best ways, I hope, to run a pretty D-tier warband, one of the worst factions in the game. I think that this would really help them to feel like you're really truly playing Warcry when you play them at an event, and that's a really good thing. So anytime you can sort of take these sort of unloved factions and give them some real play, I think that's a great place to be, and I would really love to try this out. Speaking of a faction that is very points efficient but has trouble scoring points, the Gorger Maw Pack. They, of course, most of them have the Beast Rune mark, so they can't pick up treasures. They only come with 5 fighters in a warband, which means that they can't win objective missions easily. But there are things we can do. I've seen a few people have a little bit of success running a brute boss with them. So that's one little PSA, because a brute boss costs about the same as the more expensive Gorgers. It costs 190, whereas a Gorger can be 185. So with a little bit of points massaging, you can just slot one right in and still have 5 models. But another way to do it would be to just increase your number of fighters. Increasing your number of activations has more benefits than just counting on objectives, right? You can finally do weight actions. Gikit is very good at weight actions. And then they also give you some utility that you can't get otherwise, right? So Shank has a net, so can disrupt other factions. I mean, the Clawback is really powerful. The Cave Howler is really powerful, but they will rarely be the most powerful thing on the board. So having a single netter can be really nice there. And then, of course, the Brugit does what the Brugit does. It's very, very powerful. So I do think that this is a way to actually score points with Gorger Maw Pack. You're hungry for bodies that can actually carry treasures. This only has 2 fighters that cannot carry treasure. Manok is actually pretty reasonable as a tax to get these bodies and get this netter, because Manok has venom-crusted weapons as an ability to give +1/+1 damage, which is really nice combo with the Brugit, which will give +3 attacks. So you give +3 attacks, and then you make each of those attacks do real damage by doing venom-encrusted weapons. So for the cost of 2 doubles, your 185-point fighter can actually become like a huge, huge damage output. Now, of course, the Clawback is still a better Brugit target, but the fact that you have a really good one for pretty cheap is really, really nice there. He's not necessarily the most powerful thing you could have in Destruction, but the fact that you get to have these 2 reasonable chaff models with him makes him worth it, I think. And really, I would really like to see someone try this. I have Gorger Maw Pack. I've got this guy. This is my current Clawback. It's a work in progress at the moment, but I've been having a lot of fun painting it. And this is one way you could do it, I don't actually have Manox Underworlds team, but I do have a Brute Boss, so I might be trying that at some point. Finally, I think it would be really funny if someone did a meme Slanesh team. We've got the Dread Pageant. These are some pretty reasonable semi-elites. I think the Dread Pageant is not necessarily a key to tournament play because it's just not extreme enough in any way. Vasilak is good. Slake Slash is very good, but they're not really elite enough to go where kind of the shape of tournament play is at the moment. We need a bit of a points update on, just things at the far extremes. But this list is sweet because you have 7 Blissbrew Homunculi. They are the 55-point fighter that is in Slanesh that you never see anybody spam because they only come 1 to a box, and it's a reasonably expensive box at $60. So they are less good than counter because shared pain deals damage for the damage they actually get through to you. But they are move 5, which means they can do a lot that the best counter bots can't do, which is really nice. You don't have to waste your dice on movement abilities, things like that. And then you can also kind of run around, get treasures with them. They're not great treasure carriers, but they're good treasure grabbers, if that makes sense. And of course, Slake Slash with that charge ability is incredibly powerful in those types of missions. I do think that to be sort of top tier, you would need to have a heavier hitter here, which is why I would say this is more of a meme warband, but it is really sweet. Glissette is actually very points efficient for how much she costs. She's, again, on the old algorithm that didn't punish movement quite so much. Hadzu is also much better than what you can get archers at this current points cost. Hadzu is a very reasonable archer. The sort of closest competing one does the same amount of damage as him, but for 25 more points. So Hadzu is pretty reasonable. Everything in this warband is pretty reasonable. The question is, can you source 7 homunculi? That's going to be tough. You'll probably need to go on Etsy and find some sort of replacement. Now, moving on to order. A True Stone Seneschal, 3 Stone Guard, a Warden, Calthea Zandire, a Doraz Giantfell, and an Annihilator Prime. So this is sort of a Stormcast and Lumineth hybrid warband. I haven't seen a ton of Stone Guard get played. I've seen them do okay, but I haven't seen a ton of them out there. I don't know if that's just a model popularity thing or what. I don't know. But they are very points efficient, and I'd like to see them in events. They are pretty good. This list is kind of using Calthea to try to move them around the board a little bit faster. There's a lot of reasonable targets for Calthea here. The Truestone Seneschal is not the heaviest hitting leader out there, but at move 3, it does deal a lot of damage for how much it costs. It doesn't have a ton of wounds, but it has a reasonable number, and you'll get some real damage out of it. So Calthea has 3 things she's very excited to be giving bonus moves to, as far as Doraz, Annihilator Prime, and the Seneschal. But also those Stone Guard are very good too, and they have 2-inch reach, and they're just very solid at putting out damage. They have a double that can make them a little bit more durable. So they're very solid. I actually do have all these models. The only issue for me is I've painted 3 different Lumineth test models, and I didn't like any of the schemes, so I'm not sure what to do. I'm running out. I only have 5 of the archers, and those are my test models because I'm not going to run them in Warcry, and I'm running out of archers to paint to try to test color schemes, so I need to nail it in the next 2, so I probably won't be playing this warband anytime soon, but I will be playing it at some point locally probably, and that should be pretty fun. I'm looking forward to it. Oh, the one thing I do need to mention here, the one thing that kind of holds you back in this is Doraz. Doraz is kind of medium. I wish that there was a good sort of bigger Lumineth melee hero. Something like what they have in AOS is the one, they have the Cow Mountains, but 2, they've got the guy who's an empty suit of armor, and he's very reasonable. I wish there was some sort of Warcry friendly replacement for him, because that would be really nice. Let's go on to kind of similar ideas in order. And these are all sort of warbands that are really suffering from the loss of Tempest's Eye. I think in general, when I did my meta video, Order had a positive win rate. And a big part of that is you would see Tempest's Eye allies in tons of Order lists just kind of shifting their move 3 fighters around. And now that's a lot harder. And so I think it's really interesting trying to overcome that. And I think Underworlds is the best place to do it. So Calthea again, and then still bringing Doraz. But then we have Kixitaka and Otapodal too. So we are double underworlding it. An Arco Admiral is our leader. And then we've got 3 Arco with Spear and 1 Arco with the pistol. There's kind of a lot of utility here. Again, we have a number of reasonable targets for Calthea to be accelerating in terms of the Admiral, Doraz, having some elite fighters there. The Admiral is a very impressive combat hero, which is really nice, 445 points. Otapodal gives a lot of utility that you wouldn't have access to otherwise, in terms of being able to be pretty fast, being able to be quite a good shooter, again, on the old algorithm. So costing, Otapodal would be like 110 points now, maybe 120 points now, based on what you get for him. So he's very, very powerful. Then you have Fight for Profit in this list as well. This list has a lot of powerful triples that you can put anywhere, but they don't really compete with each other because they do different things. So, Calthea and Kixitaka are both movement abilities, though Calthea is also an attack ability. Arco Admirals are an attacks pumper, and so you can really you'll use them at different times. It won't necessarily feel like they compete a ton. Fight for Profit is amazing with Doraz and with Otapodal. It's actually pretty good with Kixitaka too. And of course the Arcanaut Spears, who have 3 pretty reasonable spear attacks. Getting +1, +2 attacks on all of those is really powerful. I think that this is legitimately a very powerful warband. I don't have any of these pieces. I have 1 Arco with Spear. I have plenty of Arcos with Pistol. I don't have Kixitaka. I don't have Otapodal. I don't have an Admiral for my KO. I bought KO a long time ago, so I have a Mizzen Master and then a bunch of Arcos. So I can't run this list. I hope someone does, because I do think it's legitimately good. There's a lot to like here in terms of points efficiency, in terms of powerful abilities at your disposal. Other attempts I've kind of made at brewing these, I've nicknamed at times short boy cardio lists, have been very slow and very powerful on objective missions where everyone's forced to get into a fight, and then the Arcos with Spear and their 2-inch reach, they get to all kind of be stabbing at the same time and getting an Admiral in there and just doing a ton of damage. But they would really struggle in other types of missions where you have to run around the board, or whether you have to run down a shooter in a situation where the opponent doesn't have to run to an objective so that they can stay out of combat with you, so that they can keep shooting you, things like that. Those kind of lists are really solid, but they have these kind of big problems to them. They're a lot like actually the new Vulcan Flame Seekers, to be honest. Maybe a little bit more powerful because they are a little bit more points efficient, because they don't have that terrible ranged attack that just makes Vulcan a lot less points efficient. But they do have some weaknesses that I think this list does a long way towards sort of solving, and I would really like to see someone try it. Our last list, I'll finally do something that doesn't have any Underworlds in it. A Doomseeker, an Annihilator Prime, a Tree Rev Scion with Spear, a Hearthguard with Poleaxe, and 7 Volkites with Shields. This is trying a completely different way to overcome the loss of Tempest's Eye, which is just bringing in a teleporter. The Tree Revenant Scion with the Spear is the one. It has to teleport 5 inches outside of enemy models, but because it moves 4 and has range 2, it can actually get an attack in after it's teleported, which is really nice. The attack isn't the most incredible attack in the world, but it is reasonable, and it will probably get real damage in, and so it can really, really help you in any situation where your opponent is trying to run away with a treasure carrier or something like that. or if you just need to kind of teleport into a gun line to get some kind of damage into them. Unfortunately, you can't get under 1 inch, so they can still shoot other things, but you're getting the damage in right away, and the Tree Rev Scion isn't going to get shot because, you know, it's within 3 inches of them. Things like that can be really nice. And you also, of course, have 7 toughness 5, 12 wound dwarves that are just ready to counter people off the board. This is very, very strong as an approach on objective missions. You don't necessarily have all of the acceleration pieces that you used to be able to access, and this one's trying to do it without Calthea. But you do have, your Doomseeker is a reasonable fighty piece. The Annihilator Prime is a reasonable fighty piece. The hope is that you can get them into combat because they're not very fast. These lists have had success. A lot of their natural prey has kind of just been driven out of the metagame because it can't handle them. It can't handle a lot of other similar lists that have existed from time to time. So people often just don't run those things at tournaments anymore. But it is pretty powerful, and I'd like to see people try to overcome the loss of Tempest Eye, just because it's, dwarves are cool, and it would be sad to see them just leave the metagame just because Cities of Sigmar left. I'm not counting Caradron Overlords, which are everywhere right now, but they're a little bit different than the rest of dwarves. I mean, non-KO dwarves or non-Aether Cannon dwarves are cool, and I would like to see them not go away. So hopefully someone at Adepticon is trying to fight the good fight there. That's it for my sort of list dump of pre-Adepticon. These are some ideas of all Bladeborn warbands that are using Bladeborn fighters that don't look exactly the same as other fighters in your list, can maybe have a little bit easier time being told apart, can give you a lot of really cool abilities that will be just useful to have. The one place I'm a little concerned is Gicket and Shank looking so similar, but Shank does have like a weird little thingy, so it's maybe a little bit better than some of the situations. So this has been a fun list dump. I hope you are excited. If anyone watching here hasn't booked for Adepticon and can, there are 4 spots left for the competitive tournament. There's none for the big narrative tournament, unfortunately. I'm looking forward to trying to bring something janky and weird to that one. But until the next one, may all your rolls be crits.